You ever get that feeling when you're working on a sale and it's just not like those quick ones
Wait.
where you can just like use a couple closing lines and it's done? You know, those quick transactions?
Right, yeah.
I think we all know those. But when you're working on something big and complex,
Definitely, yeah.
it's just totally different. It's more about building those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to earn that trust over time. So today, we're going to deep dive into that whole art.
Okay, love it.
And to guide us, we've got Spin Selling by Neil Rackham.
Oh, yeah. Great choice.
I mean, this guy really went all out. He analyzed like over 35,000 sales interactions
Wow, 35,000.
to figure out what actually gets results. So that's what we're going to unpack.
I'm excited. I love this book.
Yeah, and one of the things that surprised me most was that Rackham found that a lot of those like classic closing techniques,
Yeah?
you know, the ones we've all heard,
Right.
they can actually backfire in these larger sales.
That's so true. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. It kind of blew my mind. When I first read that, I was like, wait, hold on.
Yeah. You think closing is the most important part, right?
Exactly. That's what I always thought. So why wouldn't those techniques work when the deal is bigger?
Well, think about it this way. When you're making like a small purchase,
Okay.
something you decide on the spot, maybe a little pressure could work, you know?
Like almost trick you into it.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But with bigger decisions, when there's more at stake,
Mm-hmm.
those same tactics can actually trigger what's called psychological reactance.
What is that?
Basically, it's like this built-in resistance. We all have it. It's like when you feel someone's trying to manipulate you into doing something.
Oh, yeah. I hate that.
Exactly. You put your guard up. So instead of like smoothly guiding the customer towards a decision,
You're like pushing them away.
exactly, you're creating that resistance
Yeah.
and they become less likely to buy.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So does that mean closing just kind of disappears in large sales?
Not really. It's more about redefining what closing actually means.
Okay. How so?
Instead of thinking of it as that like final push, it's more about guiding the customer towards a clear commitment.
Okay, I'm listening.
And for that, Rackham has this really helpful framework. He outlines 4 possible outcomes of a sales call.
Okay.
You've got orders, those are the obvious wins, right?
Right.
And then you've got no sales, which, well, we all want to avoid those.
Yes.
But then there are these 2 that are a bit trickier to navigate: advances and continuations.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between an advance and a continuation?
Right. They both sound like you're moving forward,
Yeah.
but the difference is super
Yeah.
important. An advance is a concrete step forward.
Okay.
It's like getting the client to agree to a trial or a proposal,
Right.
or maybe to schedule a meeting with other decision makers.
Got it.
It's an action, a real commitment.
Mm.
A continuation, on the other hand.
Yeah.
It might feel good.
Yeah.
You know, you had a great conversation, got positive feedback,
Got it.
but there's no concrete commitment. And
Yeah.
that's where things can get tricky.
So you might think you've basically closed the deal,
Right.
but you're actually stuck in this continuation loop. Exactly.
Ah.
And Rackham tells this story in the book. It's about this salesperson who was so focused on getting good feedback
Oh, no.
that he totally missed the fact that the client hadn't actually committed to anything.
Oh, man.
He thought he had a successful close, but it was just a continuation.
That's got to be so frustrating.
It is. And it happens more often than you'd think.
So how do we avoid that trap?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right. How do we make sure our calls are leading to advances?
Yes, those concrete steps forward.
The ones that actually move the sale forward.
Exactly. And this is where Rackham's research gets really interesting.
I'm all ears.
He found that there's a specific type of question that's super effective.
Ooh. Tell me more.
He calls them implication questions.
Implication questions. Okay, I've never heard of those.
They're really powerful.
Hmm.
Instead of just asking about problems like, are you having trouble with X?
Right.
Implication questions, dig deeper. They explore the consequences of those problems.
Interesting.
You help the client see the issue as bigger and more urgent.
Okay, so it's not just, are you having trouble with X? It's more like,
Exactly. You're helping them connect the dots and see the potential cost of inaction.
that's smart.
And it can have a huge impact. There's this great example in the book where a salesperson is talking to a client about their machines,
Okay.
and it seems like a minor issue. The machines are difficult to use, but by using implication questions,
Yeah.
he's able to show the client how those clunky machines are actually impacting their entire operation,
Wow.
costing them time, money, even affecting employee morale.
That's amazing. So you're not just pointing out the problem,
Wow.
you're showing them the ripple effects.
The bigger picture.
But isn't there a risk of making the client feel overwhelmed? Like too much negativity?
That's a good point. It's definitely a balance.
Yeah.
You don't want to scare them off, but you do want them to see the real cost of doing nothing.
Right.
And when it's done well, implication questions don't make them feel pressured. They actually make them feel understood.
Okay, that makes sense, because you're showing that you really get their situation.
Exactly. You're on their side.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to sales.
It's a game changer.
So we've got implication questions helping us really uncover those needs.
Yes.
But what about actually guiding the client towards the solution?
That's where another type of question comes in. Need-payoff questions.
Ooh, need-payoff questions. All right, tell me about those.
They're all about shifting the focus from problems to solutions.
Okay, I like where this is going.
We'll dive into that right after this break.
All right, so we spent that last section talking about uncovering the client's needs and really helping them grasp those implications.
I'm digging deep.
So I'm guessing this is where those need-payoff questions come in.
You got it.
Yeah.
They're all about shifting the focus
Okay.
from dwelling on the problems to thinking about the solutions.
So instead of like harping on the negative stuff,
Exactly.
we're going to help the client see those positive outcomes.
Yes, all the value they stand to gain.
Okay, I'm liking this already. Give me an example.
Okay, imagine you're talking to a client who's struggling with inefficient processes.
Right.
Instead of asking like, what's the biggest bottleneck in your current workflow?
Yeah, that's kind of negative.
Right, it kind of puts them on the spot.
Right.
So instead you could ask something like, how much time and money do you think you could save with a more streamlined system?
Ooh, I like that much better.
Right.
It gets them thinking about the positive impact.
Exactly.
And it's even quantifiable.
Yes. And that can be really powerful, especially for business clients.
For sure. Numbers speak volumes.
They do. And here's another brilliant thing about need-payoff questions.
Tell me.
By getting the client to actually articulate the benefits themselves,
Yeah.
you're not only building buy-in,
Makes sense.
but you're also creating a more collaborative and engaging conversation.
Oh, so it's not me just telling them how great the solution is.
Right.
They're kind of convincing themselves by talking it through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're discovering the value for themselves.
And I bet that makes them way more receptive.
It does. Rackham's research actually found that sales calls with a high number of need-payoff questions were consistently rated more favorably by clients.
Wow, so they actually enjoyed those conversations more?
They did. They felt like they were part of the solution-finding process.
Not just being sold to.
Exactly. More like a partnership.
Okay, I'm definitely adding need-payoff questions to my arsenal.
Good choice.
Yeah.
I think you'll be surprised how well they work.
I'm excited to try them out. Are there any situations where they're, like, especially effective?
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
They're a game changer when you're dealing with those internal champions.
Oh, right. Those are the people inside the client's organization who need to sell the solution to their own team.
Yes, they're your advocate.
Right, because they're the ones who ultimately have to make the case for why the investment is worthwhile.
Exactly. And need-payoff questions give them the ammunition they need.
Because if they can articulate those benefits clearly,
Yes, clearly and persuasively.
then they can really champion the solution internally.
Exactly. You're essentially equipping them to be your advocate.
Wow, it's like you're not just selling to the client. You're giving them the tools to sell it internally.
That's a win-win.
This is so smart. It really highlights that need-centric approach that we've been talking about.
It does. It's all about putting the client's needs front and center.
Okay, so we've talked about this a bit in the context of new product launches.
Right.
But what does a need-centric approach look like in a more general sense?
It's really about putting the client's needs at the forefront of every interaction.
So it's not just about what I want to sell.
No, it's about them.
It's about their challenges, their goals, what motivates them.
Exactly. You're seeing the world through their lens.
Trying to understand their perspective.
Yes, and then offering solutions that genuinely address their specific needs.
So it's not about me pushing my product.
No,
It's about me being a problem solver.
exactly. You become a trusted advisor.
I like that. And that's got to be a much more powerful way to build those relationships.
It is. And it's much more sustainable for long-term success.
This is seriously making me rethink my entire sales philosophy.
I'm glad to hear it. It's a shift in mindset.
It is.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, in a practical sense, how do we actually implement these principles?
Good question. It can feel a bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah, I'm thinking about all the things I need to change.
Well, one of the most valuable tools that Spin Selling offers is a framework for structuring sales conversations.
Okay, a framework. I like that. Tell me more.
It's like a roadmap for navigating those complex interactions.
All right, I'm all ears.
Rackham breaks down a sales call into 4 distinct stages:
Okay.
opening, investigating, demonstrating capability, and obtaining commitment.
Those sound pretty straightforward.
They are. Each stage has its own purpose and its own set of strategies.
Makes sense. So let's break those down one by one.
Sure.
What's the most important thing to remember about the opening stage?
Well, it's all about setting the tone,
Okay.
establishing rapport.
First impressions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also about getting down to business quickly.
So no need for like a ton of small talk?
No, especially when you're dealing with a busy executive.
They don't have time for that.
They don't.
Yeah.
Your clients want to know why you're there and how you can help them.
So be clear and concise.
Exactly. Quickly establish the value you bring.
Show them you've done your homework.
Exactly. And once you've set the stage, you can move into the investigating stage.
Okay, this is where things get juicy.
This is where the spin questions really shine.
So we're going to start digging into those needs.
Yes, you'll use all 4 types of spin questions.
Remind me what those are again?
Situation questions, to gather background information.
Oh.
Problem questions, to uncover pain points. Implication questions, to explore the consequences of those problems. And then need-payoff questions, to guide them towards articulating those benefits.
So it's like a systematic approach
It is.
to understanding their situation and their needs on a much deeper level.
Exactly. You're gathering all the information you need.
Almost like a detective.
I love that analogy. You're piecing together the puzzle.
And the more we investigate...
The better we can tailor our solution.
Okay, so we've opened the conversation, we've investigated the client's needs. Now what?
The next stage is demonstrating capability.
So this is where we start connecting our solutions to those needs.
Exactly. You're not just listing features and benefits.
Right. It's got to be relevant.
It does. You're showing them how your solution directly addresses their pain points.
Okay, so it's not just, here's what our product can do.
Yeah.
It's more like, remember that problem you mentioned, here's how we can solve it.
Exactly. You're making that connection between the what and the why.
Showing them the value.
Precisely. And when you can do that effectively, it sets the stage for the final stage.
Obtaining commitment.
Yes, the moment of truth.
So this is where we go for the close.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
But remember, in large sales, closing isn't about pressure tactics.
Right. Manipulation.
No, it's about securing a clear commitment.
Okay, so a concrete next step.
Exactly. Whether that's a trial, a proposal, or a meeting with other decision makers.
So it's not about forcing a decision.
No.
It's about guiding them towards a natural next step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Based on the value you've demonstrated.
And if we've done our job right in those previous stages,
Then the commitment should flow naturally.
because they already see the value.
Exactly. This framework is so helpful.
It is. It gives you that structured approach.
It does, making you feel more confident and clear.
I'm already feeling better equipped to handle those big deals.
That's great to hear.
This has been so helpful, but I know there's even more to unpack.
There is. We've only just scratched the surface.
So let's keep diving in.
Let's do it.
We're going to talk about some of the finer points of asking those speed-on questions.
Yes.
How to handle objections.
Right.
And building those strong relationships that really lead to long-term success.
Those are key.
Stay tuned.
All right, so we've covered a ton about speed-on selling.
We have. It's a dense book.
It is. I'm feeling a lot more confident about those speed-on questions.
That's great. But I gotta admit, I'm still a little intimidated to actually use them.
Yeah, I get that. It's one thing to read about it,
Right.
but putting it into practice is a whole other challenge.
Exactly. Any tips for actually using those questions well?
Of course. So one common mistake is asking too many situation questions.
Oh, yeah. Those are the ones to get background info, right?
Exactly. And it's easy to overdo it.
Right. Because clients are busy.
They are.
Yeah.
And they don't want to feel like they're being interrogated.
Or like you haven't done your research.
Exactly. So do your homework beforehand
Okay.
and only ask those essential situation questions.
Just to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. And when it comes to problem questions, make sure they're relevant.
Okay. So not just throwing out random problems.
Right. Think about what matters most to this specific client.
And tailor those questions.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the questions are relevant...
They're going to tune out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, once you've uncovered those problems, that's when you bring in those powerful implication questions.
Right. To help them see the bigger picture.
Yes. The potential consequences of not addressing those problems.
How do we do that without freaking them out?
It's a balance, for sure.
Yeah.
You want to be realistic about the costs of inaction,
Yeah.
but you don't want to sound like a doomsayer.
Right. So no, your business is going to fail?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Focus on the specific implications that matter most to them.
Okay, so something like, have you considered how this could impact your growth targets?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're framing it in a way that connects to their goals.
And if they see how it affects what matters to them,
They'll be more motivated to find a solution.
oh, okay, that makes sense. So we've uncovered the problems, we've explored those implications, and now it's time for those need-payoff questions.
Right, to guide them toward that solution.
And this is where we shift the energy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
from negative to positive.
So instead of what are your biggest challenges,
Yeah.
it's more like, what would it mean for your team if you could streamline this process?
Exactly. You're getting them to think about those positive outcomes.
And when they say it themselves,
They really buy into it.
it's like they're co-creating the solution.
Exactly. And that's what spin selling is all about.
It's a partnership.
It is.
Yeah.
You're guiding them towards a solution that truly meets their needs.
This is making so much sense now. But what about objections?
Ah, yes, those are inevitable.
Right, even when we do everything right.
Exactly. But spin selling actually has some great advice for handling them.
Okay, all ears.
Rackham says the best way to handle objections is to prevent them
Wait, prevent them? How?
by building value throughout the conversation.
Okay.
If you've done a good job of understanding their needs,
And showing how your solution aligns.
a lot of those objections just won't come up.
Because they're already convinced.
Exactly. But, of course, some objections are unavoidable.
Right.
And when they do come up, the key is to listen carefully,
Okay.
acknowledge their concerns, and address them empathetically,
So don't just dismiss them.
no matter how small they seem,
Validate their perspective.
and then offer a solution or explanation that really puts them at ease.
So it's almost like turning that objection into an opportunity.
Exactly. A chance to build even more trust.
Okay, I like that. So beyond the questions and objections, what else can we do to really excel in these big sales?
Well, one of the biggest things is building those strong relationships.
Okay, so it's not just about closing deals.
It's about building connections that go beyond that transaction.
Yeah, thinking long term.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Large sales are a marathon, not a sprint.
that's a good way to put it.
Be patient, persistent,
Mhm.
and genuinely invested in your client's success.
So it's more about being a trusted advisor.
Exactly. Someone they can rely on.
And that trust takes time.
It does. It's built through consistent communication, follow-through, and a genuine desire to see them succeed.
So going the extra mile.
Exactly. Always putting their needs first.
And when we do that,
The sales will follow.
because people buy from people they trust.
That's the bottom line.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on large sales.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's not about tricks or pressure. It's about understanding needs and building those genuine relationships.
That's what it's all about.
And to everyone listening out there, I hope this deep dive into spin selling has given you some valuable tools
Yes.
to apply to your own sales journey.
Remember, it's about being helpful.
Not just about being the best talker.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into spin selling.
We'll see you next time.